Hello and welcome to this week's Property Matters, the show that brings global industry trends to an Irish audience. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email at well, it's very faint here. Hello at iPropertyRadio.com. I think I got that one right. Your host today is Carol Tal and myself, Brian Fox.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So, as part of Techstars Startup Week Dublin, PropTech Ireland is delighted to host a conversation in the RDS Members Club on the use of artificial intelligence for real estate and construction. It's this Thursday. The tickets are free, and details of the event can be found on proptech.ie or prop-tech.ie. Also, there's another special event. The Property District team launched their 2020 C-Suite Sessions initiative, and this is starting with a masterclass in Space as a Service with Anthony Slumbers, also this Thursday in the RDS Members Club. So places are limited for that, as it's only a small group, but you can find out more details on propertydistrict.ie. Now, as it's Construction Safety Week, we have a special show today. So first in studio to talk to us about Construction Safety Week is Dermot Carey, Director of Safety Training and Skills at the Construction Industry Federation. Dermot, you're very welcome.
Thanks very much, Carol.
So, obviously, we've actually already heard a lot about Construction Safety Week. There's been great media attention already, which is very important. So you might just start by explaining just very quickly what is Safety Week all about?
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, obviously construction is a major employer, and I suppose in the last number of years hasn't had the best media coverage from a health and safety perspective. Notwithstanding that, there's been considerable investment in health and safety in the sector, particularly in the last 20 years. Construction Safety Week is an opportunity for the industry to profile what it's doing, to try and inject a little bit of enthusiasm also into health and safety. Health and safety necessarily doesn't have the best media profile, in that many people will what's the phrase? They will criticise lots of health and safety initiatives, but the purpose of Construction Safety Week is for the industry to spend one full week focusing in on health and safety, how it impacts on the workers, and we're coming into a time now, winter, where generally it's a more hazardous period of time. It's an opportunity for us to just give health and safety a boost and focus in on what we believe are some of the key issues that the industry needs to deal with. And we've highlighted, we have a theme for each day, and those themes have been deliberately picked as key issues for the sector. And so it's an opportunity for the industry to focus in and work together in a collaborative way to promote best practice in the industry.
What do you think has the attitude to health and safety on construction sites improved down the years, do you think?
I think it has, and I think it has hugely in the last number of years. I can remember a time when it maybe wasn't as a priority issue as it is now. And indeed, I worked on sites both in Ireland and the UK where health and safety wouldn't have been a key priority.
It's funny, because now I'm bringing this topic up because I was passing a construction site, a small one, I think it was a small site, now that we're talking about it, and the guy, the scaffolding was properly done with the piece there to prevent people falling off about their feet and so forth. And he said, if that were a few years ago, a lot of that fencing wouldn't be there at all, So, it does seem as if there is a greater emphasis now on that type of the small aspects of safety on the site.
Well, for me, I think really the focus began about 20 years ago, and when the industry was going through a bit of a crisis. And at that time, what's called the Construction Safety Partnership was set up, which has some of the key players, or all of the key players, stakeholders in the industry, including the Construction Industry Federation, the health and safety authorities, the trades unions, various government departments such as Department of Enterprise and Innovation, the National Irish Safety Organisation, all the key players, and the professional bodies. And the focus at that time was to develop a plan for the industry so that we could drive safety. And that Construction Safety Partnership continues to exist and brought in such things as SafePass, mandatory training for the sector. And just if we take SafePass as an example, SafePass is a 1-day basic safety training program, and all general operatives and craft people and on-site security people must do SafePass. So over last year, I think 100,000 people did SafePass, and they have to do it every 4 years. So that's a considerable investment alone, just in training and awareness. So I mentioned the Construction Safety Partnership. They are the key vehicle that we all cooperate to drive safety within the industry. And it's through that mechanism that Construction Safety Week is part of the CSP, Construction Safety Partnership Initiative, where we all work together to improve safety.
Absolutely. And I know you're talking about the origins going back, over decades. But I think it's fair to say that Construction Safety Week has definitely kept relevant with the times. I was looking at the breakdown of your themes for each day, and I see that you have kind of a theme of working safely with hazardous substances, vehicle risk and safety in lifting operations, working safely at height, working safely with electricity. But I see that you launched on Monday with mental health and well-being in construction. Now, that's something here at Property Matters we feel really strongly about. And in fact, we've had Fiachra Morrison, clinical hypnotherapist, come in several times since January, since the start of the year, to talk about this and remind people about this. But you might just maybe tell us first of all, how long has a focus on mental health been brought into Safety Week for construction? I
suppose I probably need to step back a little bit further in that, the science is health and safety. The industry has generally been very good at focusing on safety and not so much on health. Right. But we're trying to address that. And one of those key elements is mental health and well-being. This issue probably became into sharp focus for us in probably 2014 and 15, which was still a time when the recession was very much impacting on the construction sector. And feedback from our members indicated to us that from their employees and indeed their friends were experiencing difficulties, and some of it was related to family issues and financial issues, and some of it relation to job issues. So it became obvious to us that we needed to do something. We needed to highlight that, and the best thing we could do at least was get the issue discussed. And men aren't that good at discussing mental health issues. So I brought along here, for instance, we ran a campaign with Pieta House in 2015 called Mind Our Workers, which was designed to start that conversation. And at the time we brought people in to hold toolbox talks on site on the issue of positive mental health. And maybe at the time we started maybe too much down the critical point, where we were focusing on suicide, and the rates of suicide were quite startling in that 10 people a week at the time were taking their own lives. 8 out of 10 of those were male, and the figures indicated that quite a lot of those were either had or do work in the construction sector. So it's from that we realised we need to start that conversation. So in the present format of Construction Safety Week, mental health has featured as one of the themes every year.
Yeah.
So, and it continues to do so.
How's it been received?
Feedback from people on site indicates that that's probably the most interactive day. Indeed, yesterday I was out on a site in West Dublin. Colin Construction, one of our sponsors for the week, were running an event where they had Theatre for Work in, which reenacted an issue that might come up in any workplace where somebody was experiencing issues with regard to their mental health, and particularly in the construction side, if somebody's not 100% clued in, there's dangers to them, but there's also dangers to others.
Of course,
considering the hazards that are exposed to.
I know this is something that's very prevalent on sites. It's well talked about, and this thing of consumption of alcohol and drugs, is that something now that you're trying to come to terms with or deal with?
Currently, the CIF is developing a policy, a standard policy for our members, for them to use in relation to drugs and alcohol. And again, the construction industry isn't the only industry.
No, I'm not trying to signal you out on that. Yeah. Let's make that
But obviously,
clear.
It's an area we're concerned about. I think in general, members are used to dealing with alcohol. And feedback again from members is that that's not such an issue anymore. Their concern is drugs and things that they're not familiar with. There was at one point the Health and Safety Authority intended to introduce mandatory testing for certain what they called high-risk activities. Mm-hmm. That never materialised, but there still is within the legislation, there's an obligation on employees to be fit for work, which includes that you are not under the influence of alcohol. So it is an issue for the industry. It's not probably directly related to mental health and well-being.
Oh, of course.
It's a general issue right across the board.
And mental health and well-being is something we're going to come back to actually in the next part of the show, because we have Fiachra Morrison here again today to talk about this. But today, Tuesday, was working safety with electricity. So what kind of initiatives were happening across building sites today?
Just looking at the activities that people were reporting on, I suppose we were trying to focus on two things. One was dial before you dig, so locating of underground and overhead services. Again, ESB networks are one of our sponsors, so they're obviously
ESB
a major
networks,
concern
gas
for them.
networks and SSE electricity, Irish Water, and actually it's worth pointing out Kirby Group, Hilty, Keating Construction, and Walls Construction. So you've got a number of key players in the industry all working to support this initiative, which has to give great credibility and actually give a greater voice.
Oh yeah, and absolutely it helps. Without that sort of sponsorship, we couldn't develop the week the way it has developed. Yeah. But in relation to electricity, I said there's two different areas there. One is inadvertently hitting electricity. The second is working with electricity, as in installations and live installations. So they were the key initiatives, and I see, just looking at what people were doing today, issues like locating underground services, running programs on that, but also lockout, tagout type schemes, so how to ensure that you're not exposed to high voltage electricity. So there's lots of good things happening today. Are
there any new technologies around the area of, because Dial Before You Dig, I understand, is a very important campaign, but surely in this day and age, there's technologies that might actually make this a little bit easier.
Well, Gas Networks Ireland are about to launch a new initiative which is more digitally based, and where people will be able to locate the services online and able to reproduce and print out the drawing of the area. So that'll be an awful lot more. And
are they completely accurate?
So they tell us. And I'd say it'll soon be tested. Yeah,
and tomorrow, Wednesday, is working safely at height. Now, when we look at height on building sites, there's a tendency just to look towards the crane drivers, but obviously you've got a labour force that's actually, in terms of building heights, the sites you're seeing across Dublin at the moment, where are the challenges there?
Well, the HSEQ published a report earlier this year which looked at fatal accidents in the construction industry since their formation, which was 1989, and somewhere in the region of 40 to 42% of all fatal accidents in the construction sector related to falls, and continue to be so.
But from a height?
But a height is anything over a metre. And if you look at the stats, it tends to be lower heights. Unfortunately, we've just been reported a fatal accident which is from 3 metres. It tends to be higher. The higher you are, the more people are aware, and the better safeguards are put in place, while low level falls feature largely in the fatal accident, and unfortunately it tends to be smaller sites which these feature largely also.
That's interesting though. So that would tend to that might lead us to believe that there's a complacency when the height is not so great, that maybe all the steps don't need to be followed and all the rules don't need to be followed. I was listening to a report on another station earlier today that indicated that fatal accidents, that the numbers are up this year on last year already. Now, obviously, that's something that will be of concern. And is that something that's maybe...
It's disappointing that where we've been, I'm just looking at the figures here, the fatal accident rate has been decreasing since 2015. It tends to be cyclical, At one point, back as far as 2008, there were 15 fatalities in the sector. Last year, we had 5 fatalities in the sector. Right. Obviously, the target is 0, and everybody's working towards that. Unfortunately, to date, we have 7 fatalities. And all the more reason why we need Construction Safety Week to highlight the fact that...
Is that because possibly there's more construction going on in the city at the moment, or in the country?
It could be, but I have a feeling that... and there's an underlying issue with smaller sites, that it's smaller sites, smaller contracts, that an awful lot of these fatalities appear. And that's an issue that we need to try and address.
And would they be as focused as the larger sites are on health and safety?
It appears not. And as Carol said, I think maybe complacency comes into this a lot. Hence, they tend to be smaller, low-level falls that cause fatal accidents.
But then again, I mean, with these problems on sites that we're talking about this evening, knock-on consequence of that obviously is higher insurance premiums, is it not? If it continues to increase.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, insurance has always been an issue, and a key part of any company's armoury to address higher insurance premiums is to be able to demonstrate that they have a good health and safety management system in place. And indeed, as part of the initiative of the Construction Safety Partnership a number of years ago, a specific scheme has been developed called Safety Cert, which is an accreditation scheme specifically for small to medium-sized enterprises. And it's like a badge of quality for companies can demonstrate that they have a good safety management system in place and that they're committed to continual improvement.
Yeah, and I presume that's something that's increasingly important now, given to showcase yourself as a good employer, because there's such a skills shortage at the moment that surely people coming in, workers coming in, will want to go for the more quality employers. You know, and I don't think there's a correlation between big is good and small is bad. In fact, I think sometimes it can be the opposite, but I don't believe there's any correlation there. I think it's about a quality that's a top-down approach to safety and the importance of it. But surely, I suppose to bring it back to even commercial terms, to get your key hires, to get the people you need, you want to be showcasing yourself as delivering best practice in the industry. I
think so, and I think workers are more aware.
Do you think health and safety will change when the focus on modular building and with a greater focus on offsite construction? Like, we know that the health and safety figures for accidents in relation to offsite would be significantly lower by all available. I don't know if we have any stats in Ireland, but by available stats in the UK, they're considerably lower. Like,
you'd expect that would be the case, because it's a much more controlled environment to manufacture within an industrial unit rather than out on site that you're exposed to all sorts of weather.
Yeah, but even for installation, then you've got far fewer people.
You do, but it brings different hazards than you're now lifting heavier units. But all of that can be managed. So you would think that technology and the change in the way in which construction is carried out will have an impact on health and safety.
Okay, and for Thursday and Friday, I know Thursday is vehicle risk and safety and lifting operations, and then Friday is working safely with hazardous substances. Now, that's something that, we're reading a lot about in terms of residual health problems. Construction workers, who might have, is it particle dust?
Yeah, well, I think you're talking about RCS,
yes.
respirable crystalline silica, which is dust created from, say, cutting concrete and cutting stone.
Yeah. Now, there seems to be a greater awareness about that over the last number of years. So I understand that there's issues dealing with residual problems and maybe from days where there wasn't that awareness. But now, is that something that workers are more aware of and protected against?
Well, I know, employers and workers are more aware of the dangers of dust exposure, particularly respirable crystalline silica, which is in the air that you can breathe into your lungs. It is controllable, and it's controllable by wetting the area, or people wearing the proper PPE. But PPE is the last line of defence. But it is an area that people are much more aware of. The issue generally is that the individual who's cutting the stone is protected, but those who may be working around them are not protected. So hence the reason for ensuring that whatever action is taken at source, and that you're not depending on somebody wearing a mask, because then everybody has to wear a mask.
Okay. We'll leave it there for today. That was Dermot Carey, Director of Safety, Training and Skills at the Construction Industry Federation. Tomorrow after the break, we'll talk to Fiachra Morrison, a clinical hypnotherapist at Dublin Hypnosis and Therapy Centre. Stay tuned.
Everything's fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.
Oh, will you look at them go? I wish I had their energy.
They're good for the soul, though, aren't they? I can't imagine life without Lucky. But he might outlive me yet.
Oh, well, take my advice and sign up for a Dogs Trust Canine Care card. It's completely free, and it's given me such peace of mind since I did.
What's that?
Well, it's simple, really. It means if you pass away before Lucky, Dogs Trust will take him in and give him the care and love he needs until they match him with the perfect forever home.
That sounds terrific. How much did you say it costs?
It doesn't cost a cent.
Great. How do I sign up?
Just text CARE to 50100 and they'll call you with more information. Or you can go to dogstrust.ie.
Well, that's wonderful advice. I'll do that right away. Here, Lucky. Good boy.
Whatever loan you're looking for, wedding loans, holiday loans, car or home improvement loans, make sure you talk to your local Capital Credit Union, where there are no hidden charges or early repayment penalties on your loan. Loans subject to approval, terms and conditions apply. Capital Credit Union Limited, regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Senior Line is a confidential telephone service for older people. Free phone 1800 80 45 91. We're open every day of the year from 10 a.m. till 10 p.m, including Christmas Day and New Year. So it's free phone 1800 80 45 91. We're there if you need someone to talk to and need someone to listen. We're older people too, so we will understand, and we're very good at listening. Did you get the Senior Line number? It's free phone 1800 80 45 91.
Your community radio for South Dublin. This is Dublin South FM.
And welcome back here to Property Matters here in Dublin South FM with Carol Tanner, myself, Brian Fox. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. So as mentioned before the break, we're now joined by Fiachra Morrison. He's clinical hypnotherapist at Dublin Hypnosis and Therapy Centre. Fiachra, good to see you again.
Good to be back. Thank you for having me.
So let's begin by asking what it means to be emotional beings.
Well, in our emotional being, basically what that means is that we do a lot of obviously thinking and planning along, but originally we were emotional beings. We were there. That was our primary, our instinctive base. And as in emotional beings, it's our way of actually communicating with each other and with the world around us. And our emotions are what gives us a kind of a gauge to how we're fitting in with other people, with the environment, with everything. And it's really an important part to recognise that the emotional part of us and the cognitive part are very, very different. That they're very different in that it's like they're two separate, because in our cognitive, the cognitive mind is very linear. It's very logical, as you know, and it's the part that makes the decisions, that makes the plans, that does all the thinking part. But it's in that logical fashion. That's its realm. But at the emotional part of us it doesn't have that same logic. It doesn't have that same linearness, because it takes everything as if it's in the present, and all of our experiences, everything that we know, everything that we've done, is still running as if it's in the present. Which is why, a lot of our experiences can be just brought back to mind very quickly, because it's all running in a whole different realm, in a whole different way, and as with both that conscious and the emotional part just running together, that we have, the best of both worlds. But we also forget sometimes that we do have that emotional, that we have learned in a way to override our emotional reactions, because the emotional part is there to protect us, to keep us safe, to keep you within a kind of your own boundaries, within your own values and principles. Okay, and as it's doing that, what it's again one of its roles is to identify when either we're uncomfortable, we're in danger, or that we're doing something that may be harmful. Okay, and because we can override that, we can ignore it, that we can ignore those messages that we're being given. And over all these hundreds and thousands of years, we've learned how to just override that and then go along with our own with their own logical part.
Can I just you're going to kill me here and ask you this question, okay? I know you are, because
I think it's important to tell people that you're looking at me and not people.
Carol, yeah. Well, it's going to be quite obvious that I'm looking at Carol the moment I ask the question, because there's a great deal of thought, shall we say, and I'm not trying to be sexist, that women and men are very different emotional beings. How would you go along with that? Now, you don't have to. I know Carol can know that, but I mean, would you go along with that sort of theory, or are we all the same emotionally?
Well, I think, yes, men and women obviously are very different in their own physical makeup and the chemical makeup and everything that goes on. But then, on the other hand, all men are very different to each other. All women are very different to each other. And in that cognitive way, we try to put everything into a box. We try to make sense, and we try to kind of, have men over there, women over there, and then subsection everybody else, so that we get them down to the finest that we can. But it's in that it's unfair to class everybody as being the same.
Yeah.
But it's also unfair to class everybody as being very different. Okay, that what we do have in common is our differences.
But I think what Brian is getting to, and actually, I don't disagree with you at all. I do think that it is more difficult to be a man when it comes to mental health and speaking about the emotional side of things, as opposed. And I know that's a generalisation. No, sorry, it's more difficult. It's more difficult for a man. Sorry, and that it's easier for women. But also, I think that.
That's society, though. That's
women
cultural,
seem to have better support networks built up, and this is something that I've really experienced quite recently, actually, with somebody reaching out to me for help, and it's something that I'm very aware of, that women tend to have better support structures set up or in place for themselves, and there are many reasons for that, but that seems to be the case. And that's why I think, Fiachra, you must, as a clinical hypnotherapist and somebody who is involved in promoting positive mental health, it must be very heartening for you to see the Construction Industry Federation take such a strong stance, because at the end of the day, the construction industry is still predominantly made up of men, and we know that during the crash and during the difficult years here in Ireland, we know that up to 8 men per week were taking their own lives, and that's at the extreme end of when we're talking about people in need of needing to reach out and talking about mental health. But it must be very heartening to have all of these construction sites shut down, even if it's only once a year. They shut down for 2 hours to sit down and listen to a talk and join in and share their feelings, talk about things.
You're not going to get that. You're not going to get that.
No, but that does happen. That happened yesterday.
Okay.
No, that happened.
Sorry, don't mean to cry. It's your question. I'm sorry.
No, that actually happened yesterday. Sites all across Ireland shut down and for up to 2 hours while people attended talks aimed at promoting positive mental health. So that happened yesterday, and this is not the first year. As Dermot was saying, this is something that has been introduced over past years. So essentially what it's doing is that it's giving people permission to bring their whole selves on site. It's breaking down, because sometimes the term holistic gets thrown around, and I think people forget what it actually means, and it's just about the whole person, and we're all whole people. So what you are in your day job, you are, you're still a being when you go home to your family. You're still a being when you're socialising. It's all of these parts make up who we are, and that's the holistic side of things. So actually I think it's really important to have not just the worker recognised, but the holistic person recognised on site. I think it's important not just on a construction site. I think it's important if you work in Tesco's or, you know, if you're a CEO of a company. Yeah, I think it's the same, that recognition that you are a whole person, and as a whole person you are important.
Well, unfortunately, closing somewhere for 2 hours, while the acknowledgement has to be there, it is a great step. But as we have had over the last many years, on the onset of the health and safety, and the health and safety awareness and the awareness of the dangers, it has reduced, you know, deaths on site and dismemberments on site, like I mean. So, and what it did was, at the start, it met huge resistance, and it met everything that was, you know, it took that culture from being totally free to kind of now having to take responsibility, and it was a mindset change, and that's what we need for mental health. That it's not enough just to kind of be, you know,
but
to talk.
That's going to be very slow, though.
It is a very slow process, but just like with the health and safety onset, it did take the time, but people wanted because of the benefits. But now, a mindset change to where people are.
Culture change. No, culture change is important. And Dermot
Carey
just said it earlier.
I will actually put it to both of you that in any workplace, you'll always find the woman far more reluctant to be herself, surrounded by, if there are any men there, because of the cultural attitude to the workplace being one where
I think that depends on the workplace, Brian. Well, I can only say that after 15, 16 years of being self-employed, I recently had to share that we've only had 2 or 3 men employed over the 16 years, and one of them, I actually relate the story quite recently. One of them, we actually found it very difficult in terms of the culture change there to work with men in the office, because we didn't realise that men sometimes have to clean out their belly buttons in the workplace. These are things that in a female workplace, just these things don't happen. So I would say that actually for a man working in a female-dominated workplace, there might be a cultural change needed as well. So I just don't think that's true of every workplace. And, you know, I think that times have moved on as well. I think, you know, everybody's a lot more aware, and maybe construction has a little bit further to come because the gender balance isn't there. And quite frankly, the gender balance doesn't look like it's going to get there.
It's not just gender balance, it's attitude to the whole thing as well.
Well, it's interesting that when we do have, let's say, those stereotypical ideas of men and women, and their roles and what they should or shouldn't do, and it's still there.
Yeah.
As much PC as we're trying to be, it's still very much deeply
but
rooted.
I hear so much dysfunction, work dysfunction within organisations and HRs for the most part. I mean, okay, it's somewhat improving now, but the movement that was in the United States there some time ago after that movie director
Me Too movement.
Me Too movement. I mean, there was so many reports there of women being harassed and so forth in the workplace by the CEOs, etc. You know, so my point being that it's a very slow, gradual improvement, shall we say, in that type in recognising the different emotional beings that are in a workplace.
But hold on, I'm sorry. I have to drill down. Where is your thinking on bringing that into it in terms of the Me Too movement? Like, because I have heard some talk about how men don't know how to behave in the workplace on foot of the Me Too movement. That's utter nonsense. Anybody with a shred of decency knows how to behave themselves, knows how to keep their hands and their words and inappropriate behaviour to themselves. So I completely reject this notion that men are helpless and don't know how to behave in the workplace on foot of Me Too movement.
I'm not excusing them. Oh God, no, I'm not excusing them for one moment. It's deliberate.
Of course it is,
It's deliberate, absolutely. But this is my point. My point being that there is still a sense of nervousness in the workplace in relation to this sort of issue, you know.
But you also have, like, I mean, where you mentioned about having men and women in a workplace, and that divide. But even on, as you said, Carol, in the building industry, where it is male dominated.
Yeah.
That even in that maleness, that there is that divide. That some are macho, some are less macho.
Yeah.
You know, some are more sensitive than others, and it's even now it's still a stigma, you know, to be emotional, to be able to talk about your feelings for a lot of people.
Is that changing, Fiachra?
It's changing. It is changing because
we need for people to be able to talk about how they're feeling on site. And I know last year for Construction Safety Week, I remember attending a talk, and one of the things was that one of the problems with how building sites work is that you've people coming and going, they mightn't always be on site at the same time. So what it means is that, like, if you were working alongside somebody in a cubicle every day, you would recognise if maybe they were in difficulty. Whereas on a building site, it's not so easy because there's more coming and going and toing and froing. So it just means that the relationships built up are slightly different, that you're not watching people every day, and therefore things that might be warning signs aren't as obvious.
Mm-hmm. But I think as well, like, I mean, because people aren't, as this is a kind of like a new movement. Okay, we're not even in schools. You know, in the even in secondary schools, if they had a module where they were able to understand, well, these are the warning signs, these are the things to look out for,
completely.
So that as they grow. But that's again changing the culture at that level. Changing the mindset, so that when it goes into
perhaps a counsellor on site as well,
or having somebody who is trained. But then, is there any site that is going to be able to maintain that?
Can we take this into specifics here and say, like, uncontrolled? Like, we start off by talking about emotion, so uncontrolled expressions of emotion, anger, rage, resentment, and panic.
Yeah.
You know, these are all things that can be triggered.
Yeah.
On a building site, the same way they can in any workplace, but maybe on a building site the consequences are far more serious.
Yeah.
So, you know, how can these kind of uncontrolled expressions of emotion, how can they be reduced, say, on site or in any workplace?
Well, the realisation that it's not just one emotion that's actually being expressed. It's a build-up.
Even if it just looks like anger.
Yeah, because it always is another, like the last straw. It's just that way, that moment of the expression, but it's always a build-up of many different emotions, many different feelings, many different things that have gone wrong or whatever, and it's just kind of just that last moment of that explosion. And when the emotions are high, the thinking stops. The conscious mind just knocks off. And it's because the emotions don't take any thinking power. They're just a reaction. And when the emotions are at that level, then all the safety kind of can go out the window.
Yeah.
As many people have seen, either by
you go out of control,
either a physical kind of reaction, or throwing something, or
withdrawing from conversation.
and it's because their awareness of what's safe around them is now very different.
But then, say for site managers, how can site managers maybe watch for instances of this and reduce instances? Because I mean, I think the key one, say if we're bringing it back to building site, the key one would be frustrations. You know, things not going according to plan, people not being in the place at the time with what's needed. You know, and again, I completely accept what you're saying. It's never about what it's about, you know, so it's always the thing that triggers a flare up, but it's never that final thing. But how can site managers really watch and reduce instances of this?
Well, the responsibilities of site managers is to keep the place safe, and that goes for all of these. And they again will have to be would be best for them to be trained so that they can understand those, or have somebody else, maybe not the direct manager, but someone else who can, but have the power to be able to intervene and to interrupt a process, interrupt that flow of things going wrong, so it doesn't actually come to that final blow.
You know, I think a lot of this comes back to, you know, the difference between management and leadership. You know, leaders really have to be able to express this emotional intelligence, and maybe it's something that we need to get through a kind of management level as well. Fiachra, before we let you go, you might just, for anybody who maybe is feeling the need for some help, you might just remind us where the therapy centre is located.
Okay, our website is hypnosisandtherapy.ie. We have 2 centres there. They're all on that. Or you can find us on Facebook.
You're in Dublin too,
We're in Dublin too. We're just off Marion Square and Fitzwilliam Street. And we have a centre in Fairhouse. And
you're in Fairhouse as well.
We've opened up there now. So yep. So it's and I can be contacted directly. We do a free phone consultation for anyone who has any issues, so that we can again give them that sense of kind of, well, there is somebody here. There is hope there.
Okay, thank you so much. That was Fiachra Morrison, clinical hypnotherapist at Dublin Hypnosis and Therapy Centre. That's it for part 2. Please stay tuned after the break, as we'll be speaking to Vinnie Doyle of Townmore Construction.
Your community radio for South Dublin. This is Dublin South FM.
Could you and your dog spend 1 hour per week bringing special moments to people in care centres? Or would you like one of our volunteer visiting teams to come and visit your care centre? At Irish Therapy Dogs, we have a dedicated interest in the use of pet therapy for people in long-term or daily residential care. A professional organisation aimed at providing a pet therapy service on a national basis. If you with your dog would like to get involved, or if you would like one of our visiting teams to visit your care centre, then please call us on 01 544 6198 or visit irishtherapydogs.ie for more information.
Do you need a professional-looking website or graphics for your company? Does your current website work on all modern devices, such as tablets and smartphones? If not, you are losing business. Preamp Digital Media provides a full range of solutions to give your company the edge in today's digital world. Please visit www.preampdigitalmedia.com for all the information you need. That's www.preampdigitalmedia.com.
I've always provided. That's what I do. Even when the job shut down, I somehow managed. But the pressure chips away at your confidence. I felt alone. I needed to talk things out. I learned Samaritans isn't just for when you hit rock bottom. I'm glad I called.
It's always worth getting problems big and not so big off your chest. Call Samaritans. No pressure, no judgment. We're here for you. Anytime, talk to us. Free call 116 123 or go to samaritans.ie.
Broadcasting to South Dublin on 93.9. This is Dublin South FM.
And you're very welcome back to Property Matters here in Dublin South FM with Carol Talon and myself, Brian Fox. So in the studio now we have Vincent Doyle. He's Health, Safety and Environmental Quality Manager at Townmore Construction. So let's just begin by asking you, Vincent, about needing better PPQ.
Oh, yes. Basically, my background was originally in site management. I did 16 years in site management before I went into health and safety. I always had an interest in health and safety, but the big thing that always concerned me was when you're given a poor contractor and you've got to turn them around, you spend a lot of time managing them. So what I'm quite heavy on is when you're selecting contractors, do you select the right type of contractor?
These are sort of subcontractors.
Subcontractors,
You're the contractor.
Yeah. So he's basically making sure you've got everything in place and you've got visual checks. For example, he's basically sending a form out. They will fill a form in. But anyone can fill a form in, and it's the evidence behind it. And you can tell straight away what the contractor is going to be like just from the information they provide. So particularly for subcontractors, when they are filling in pre-qualification questionnaires, they just need to put a bit of thought into what they're doing. Because it's kind of a picture or a window of an opportunity for them as well. If they filled it in properly and they provide evidence, they're likely to get more work, to be honest, as well.
So you are kind of fairly strong on safety on the site, obviously, then?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked for quite large companies. The biggest company I ever worked for was, I don't know whether I can mention them.
Maybe best not to.
No, I was just thinking that. It was a big global construction company. I worked on a massive shopping centre over in the UK, which was quite a challenge. I mean, it was 600 million. And there was 3,500 people on site at its peak, and I was the only safety manager on site. So
how many many people on site?
3,500.
And there's only one health and safety manager?
Yeah, you have to juggle around how you do that, though. You have to start being clever quite quickly, because there was no way you could manage that on your own. So what we ended up having to do was we brought regular meetings in for the subcontractors. So we'd insist on their safety officers and safety managers coming on site. So instead of one, then you'd have probably about 20 safety officers on site as well. But the big thing is coordination and planning of jobs there as well. We were quite tight. We used to have, this was over in the UK, and we used to have the health and safety executive principal inspector from Manchester. He used to come in once a month onto the site, so he'd go through with a fine-tooth comb. We spend most of the day there actually going through everything.
Yeah. And you probably heard there earlier in the show with Dermot Carey and from the CIF talking about Construction Safety Week and the importance of it. But I would imagine, given your experience, you've probably seen some pretty unsafe conditions as well on site.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is how you set your store up. I mean, one of the big things is selecting the right contractors. So they've got the right attitude arriving on site as well. They'll have all the documentation, the training record and stuff like that. The big thing I find is monitoring the contractors as well, but getting everyone involved in monitoring as well. And I think as much as you can help the contractors, don't beat them up. At Townmore, we're starting to do free training for contractors as well. So things like, I often feel sorry for contractors. We expect method statements and everything to be up to standard, but then you've got to look who actually trains them to do them. And you can only get out what you actually put in. So what we're looking at doing is bringing the contractors in, doing a free training session on how to develop risk assessments and method statements as well.
So that's fantastic. So Townmore, I understand, is a growing company because I know you've recently opened another office in Cork.
That's right, yeah.
So what are the numbers employed there?
To be honest, I'm not 100% certain because I'm kind of newish there myself. They're rapidly expanding quite quickly, and they're bringing in quite a dynamic team. So they're very much up for simplifying systems and things like that.
Yeah, but it just makes absolute sense for providing training, health and safety training for the subcontractors, because then you can trust the teams coming on board.
I think where I've always come from is developing relationships between contractors and the main contractor, because for different reasons as well, we want to have the trust in our contractors that they're doing a good job, because at the end of the day we're pre-qualifying for work as well with clients, so we need to get into the position where we're a preferred contractor. The only way we're going to do that is work and develop with contractors, so we've got a good pool what we're working with, and there's a trust between ourselves and the contractors as well. I mean, for example, what we're trying to do, we went through safety training ourselves last week to do face fit testing. It's a requirement with the using safe RPE, which is respiratory protection. Now, we're offering that free of charge to the contractors for people who are using it. So we're trying to get ahead of everyone else and trying to help them out. Rather than take the old attitude of beat them into submission, we want to work with them and partner with them. So partnering would be a massive thing for us.
But you're also taking away maybe some of the hurdles, like, for example, having to invest in the safety training themselves, or maybe some of the equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think there's a good feedback from that as well, because what you start building good relationships with contractors as well, so they're going to be more compliant, and then working with them. And it's like when we do inspections on site, I would walk around with them, and if I pull someone up on something, I'll explain the reason. I think part of the problem historically with probably my own profession in reality is we tend to be too aggressive with contractors and not speak to them in the right way, where if you actually speak to them properly and explain to them what the problem is,
and why it's a problem?
Why it's a problem, yeah, because then they start thinking differently as well. And they're more likely to come on board as well. And we're developing procedures as well. So we're going to start working with contractors. So we're going to start rewarding them. So if we see that they're working well, then we'll start offering them things on site as well. But we're actually going in on a monthly monitoring performance rating as well. And rather than use it in a negative way, we're going to use it to see where the weaknesses are and help them develop so they can come on board with us. So it's a very proactive approach we're taking.
That's great to take such an empirical approach as well, because actually we had Smart PMO. It's a project management set of, and it's an analytics tool that sits on top of project management software, and essentially what it does is it pulls out the information, the bits of information exactly like you're saying there, so it actually it means that contractors and of course contractors, particularly when they're coming to bidding stage as well and tendering stage, they can actually show that rather than just telling in the bid how much better they are, they can actually show by actually showing the stats on their contractors, how regularly they work with those contractors, the reduced number of instances, which means reduced number of delays on site, and the impact is a much cleaner delivery programme.
Absolutely.
So data is something that for the construction industry, maybe the construction industry hasn't used data very well in the past, but it sounds like you're shaping up to really try actually use this in an actionable way.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've used this system probably for about 10 years, and it's kind of developed, and I've used it in different kinds of environment, manufacturing, banking system, and I tend to use the same kind of profile. And I think you've always got to be in mind that it's got to be used as a proactive way. You don't use it as a tool to beat anyone up.
Yeah.
And once you start, what I tend to do is put all the scores in a spreadsheet, and it identifies straight away where your weak areas are. And then what we do is close them out. So we work with the contractors, we work with the site management teams.
Yeah.
To identify what the problems are, work with the management team and the contractors, and develop resources to actually help them along.
Yeah, I know, in our earlier discussions you had said how health, safety, environmental and quality systems, how they should always suit the end user.
Absolutely.
So yes, of course, be relevant, but not be overly complicated. And I think maybe that's something that happened in the past.
Yeah.
How do you avoid that?
The big thing what I've done, and to be honest, it's a lot to do with experience. With my situation, because I'm from a site management background, I look at what the challenges are during the day. Health and safety, whether we like it or not, health and safety isn't their first primary thing in the mind, but we kind of need to develop that. So to me, health, safety, environmental and quality production should be all in line with each other.
So it's not an add-on or a nice to have.
No, it's got to be part of the business model, really. And
has that been lacking, that sense of thinking?
It does tend to be, yeah, but you have to promote that. I mean, I'm very much on a can-do attitude, and promoting safe practice and stuff like that. But again, you've got to build people up with that. And again, that's the benefit of training people up as well, so they understand, if they're working at height, what should be in place. And again, it's the attitude, but it's very much push the can-do attitude along the. And once I've worked for. Again, I'm not mentioning companies, but over in the UK, particularly, I worked for. I did a lot of contract work, and there's one particular company there. It was a manufacturing company, but they did stuff for the construction industry. And in that particular, the first day I went in there, they hadn't had anyone for 35 years, and they turned around to me and said, "You're never going to change anything. We're not going to change 35 years." Now, out of 100 guys working there, 75% of them had at least one digit missing. Yeah. But they wore that with pride, and I couldn't believe that one.
What do you mean? As in the company or
no, the individuals?
And I thought, like war wounds.
Yeah, and he's thinking, I've lost half a finger, and it was kind of a bit of banter. Yeah. But and the guy one guy came up to me and says, "You're wasting your time, mate. Forget it." So that was, to me, homing in. That was a challenge to me straight away.
On that point, I mean, you have these sheets here that you sent us as well, that you formulate various points. Was it difficult to implement these ideas when you came over here with Townmore?
No, to be honest, I found part of the problem you always get with is getting expenditure, and the thing is, I've always found sometimes you get managing directors who don't buy into safety. They say they do. What I found with Townmore, everything I've done brought in, they've gone straight for it. So they're very.
But in terms of the subcontractors, though, this is really
the subcontractors. The subcontractors are always difficult initially, but what you have to do is work with them and develop the skills with them.
So there is a resistance to safety measures
initially, but you can break that down very quickly. Again, it's the perception of the sites as well. If you're providing them good, clean working conditions, they'll react to that. Yeah. If you give them bad working conditions, bad welfare, they react to that as well. Yeah. So the more you're seen to be working towards them and producing a good site, then they'll react to that. And what you generally find as well is the attitudes will be bad as well. But you can change them.
That's the culture side that really needs to be changed. Okay, I liked your approach initially. Just don't give problems, give solutions, and I think
absolutely.
I think that's the most important thing. So look, Vincent, thank you so much for being with us. That was Vincent Doyle, Health, Safety, Environment and Quality Manager with Townmore Construction. Before we go, just a quick reminder about the 2 events in the RDS Members Club this Thursday. All details can be found on prop-tech.ie and propertydistrict.ie. Also, you can get in touch with the show by emailing hello@ipropertyradio.com or Twitter @ipropertyradio.
And that's it from us today in the studio. We'd like to thank our guests for joining us here today. Also, thanks to Danny Hickey. We're back at the same time next week. From Carol Tall and myself, Brian Fox. Have a great week.